I have found that the most important part of the painting, as I mentioned earlier, is the early part. You're going to learn the most seeing the early part of the painting, as opposed to, you know, putting on the fine details and everything. It's that early establishment that's so critical. Yes. One of the things I learned early on is that, like most people, particularly artists, I'm lazy. And in other words, I take shortcuts sometimes when I shouldn't. And one of the shortcuts that people tend to make is that they'll see bushes or trees like this, and they'll say, "Oh well, I could," and start making lazy loops instead of really thinking about what they're drawing. So I found that if I have a rounded shape, I break it into angular lines, which forces me to analyze what's going on and to really see the shapes that I'm working on, instead of just getting lazy and making these loops and painting clouds, you know, the same, and bushes the same. So that's the intention. That's part of the reason, and it actually just makes the drawing a little more dramatic. Okay. I don't mind spending time on initial drawings and things, because like I said, it's the early stages that are most important. That's where you're really establishing the framework, kind of putting the framing, the foundation of the house, putting that down. Okay. Now I do this because when I put the turpentine wash on there, or the Gamsol, thank you, Vicki, for your Gamsol that you loaned me. They frown on Gamsol on airplanes. So anyway, when you put that turpenoid on there, it just washes away your underdrawing unless you put something down. And this way, I don't lose it. And we are talking about an opaque medium, so I'm going to be easily cover those lines. Never do this with oil, though. But it doesn't happen with pastel. Okay, that's the first stage. Normally, I want to have that done in 10 or 15 minutes at most. And then the second stage is treating this as a watercolor, where you put in the lightest lights first, and you work towards your darks. And that's for the underpainting. But when we do the pastels, then you work from your dark to light. And I put the colors on a little richer than they really are. I found that, generally speaking, as a rule, you're going to be toning down. As you paint, you're going to be killing the color a little bit, weakening it. And so you might as well put it in there strong to begin with. These colors and choices are not all that critical at this stage.
And you're using your hard pastel?
Yeah, yes. I don't waste my soft pastels on this underpainting. One reason I like to use hard pastels in the early stages, they're just cheaper, you know, and they're going to be painted over anyway, pretty much. Okay. And now, actually, the next lightest thing is going to be that very light blue up here. This pastel quarter, by the way, this is what this is. This is an invention of mine. I had painted pastels over the years, and I'm starting to do a whole lot of plein air painting, and boy, I got tired of lugging the French easel around and all these other equipment. And I had students that every time I had a workshop, somebody would dump their entire set of pastels out on the ground. And you know, when you're talking about $5 or $6 sticks of pastels, it's a disaster. So, and I do a lot of street painting as well. And a big old French easel was just taking up too much room. And so I came up with this system to carry a lot of pastels. This holds like 300 pastels right there. And so I can carry a lot of pastels quickly.
Is this something you marketed?
Yeah, I sell them online. And I'm putting the pastels down very softly. I'm not grinding it in as if it were Crayola or something. I'm putting it in very softly. Once the sheen is gone, it's dry. And now I want to kind of look at it and make sure what I'm wanting is there, at least enough to start building on. This is just an underpainting, quick and loose. And I'm not too worried about staying within the lines or so forth. Actually, as I paint, I want to be very loose at the beginning. Not that I'm not incorrect or inaccurate, but loose. There's plenty of time to pull in detail. But if you start doing detail too soon, the painting becomes very stiff and overworked, and it's hard to fix. Once you go into the detail, really, working it, it's hard to ever go back and make it look loose and spontaneous. And that's what I want mine to look, loose and spontaneous. Okay, and also the darker areas, I always do them bigger than they really are, because the darks are a critical part of the painting, the most important. In one sense, you can see the abstract design of this picture, which is these darks right in here, running across there are the most important. They're going to be what everything else is compared to value-wise. So you always want to maintain your darks throughout the whole painting. And now I'm going to put in the darks. These are suggested darks, but they're not really all that dark. The stage that we're at right here is just the underpainting to establish those darks and to build from there. So let's see, let me look here. I'm going to start with my darkest dark. Except for black, I don't ever use black as my darkest dark, except for very rare occasions, possibly. I'd rather use dark blues. Usually, your darkest dark is going to be a shadow, and your shadows tend to have a cool cast. Blues, particularly because you've got the sky reflecting into them. And that's, to me, the shadows are the most interesting part of the painting, because where the light hits, it burns out everything. It's usually fairly simple color. But where the shadows are, you've got all this interplay of light bouncing in, and it creates these really interesting shapes and values that you just don't get in your lights. Very often you don't get it. All my canvas, except maybe the sky, I had a tone on there about a 50% value. And that's what I want. So I'm working on a multi-toned, middle tone surface here. And so that now I'm working at my darks. I've got my lightest light in there, and everything else in between is basically a middle tone. So I haven't quite finished with my darks. And I tend to use the side of my pastel as much as possible, especially in these early stages. I don't want to draw lines as such. I want to paint values. The difference between drawing and painting is when you're painting with values. When you draw, you're drawing with lines. So I'm painting, so I'm going to work with the values and big shapes. I treat my pastel as if it's a brush, as much as possible. You'll do more to loosen me up than anything else. Don't make values by drawing a bunch of lines like that. Use the side of your brush. One thing is speed up your work. You can cover a lot more ground with a few strokes on the side of a 2-inch pastel stick than if you try to do a bunch of stroking like that, which just starts looking busy very quick. You can just vary the shapes because your brush, in this case, it's a 2-inch brush as far as I'm concerned, but I can also make a 1/4-inch brush out of it if I want to. And then if I have another broken piece, I can make I can even make a sharp line out of it if I want to. So pastel is very, very adaptable.
Now you said you drew the darks larger than they usually are for dramas, because you're going to keep them that way, are you?
Well, part of it, they are the power of the painting, or your darks. And so I make them bigger because I know I'm going to come in with middle tone and lights and chip away at them.
Oh, you are.
I think of my darks as the stone on the sculpture. You got to have a piece of rock sitting out there to chip away at to create form. Well, in painting, your stone are your darks, because you're going to come chip away at them with your lights and your middle tones to create your shape. So you better paint your darks bigger than they really are. So by the time you cut away at them, they will be correct. And it gives you a lot more freedom, because you don't sweat at making them too big, because you know you're going to chip away a lot of that color. And another thing about the darks is, as I paint, and as you paint, invariably you'll be putting colors in and out of those darks, and you'll tend to start lightening them up a little bit. And what will happen is the dark starts moving towards being a middle tone. And if you don't watch it, all of a sudden the whole painting will just be one big gray middle tone. So at any point I realize, hey, I have painted away a dark too much. I stop whatever else I'm doing and reestablish that dark, because everything else you're doing is based upon your dark. And if you let that dark get weak, the whole painting will fall apart very quickly. So that's why it's so important to keep an eye on those darks and reestablish them whenever you realize you've lost them, because you will. Anything darker than your middle tone is a dark. Anything lighter than your middle tone is a light. So at this stage, after I've gotten my underpainting done, I work my darkest darks and then my secondary darks. And this is part of the procedure I was talking about, having a painting procedure you always follow. Whether I'm working with a portrait or a landscape, I put in my darkest darks, and I put in my secondary darks, and then I put in my lightest light. Now in this case, I just left the sky white. And then I work from the lightest light to the darkest dark, working towards the middle tone. Most people have their biggest problem, and I did too, losing control of the values. And this keeps you in control, because you got your lightest light and your darkest dark, and you work in between there. It gives you a limit. If you go darkest dark to light, you may overshoot your light and make it too light, or not light enough. But if you get your light and your dark and work towards the middle tone, you're a lot safer ground. So we've got kind of an interesting combination of colors. It's a lot of horizontals with verticals running through it, which is just a great, you can't miss with something. You've got a nice, strong color. horizontal base to build your vertical against. And that's when you start getting a lot of perspective in there. Once I establish my overall pattern of values, I should have already known what my center of interest is, and I will go to a center of interest and finish it off. To as much a finish as I've almost virtually finished. Because if you do your center of interest and get it right, you know the paint is going to work. You can't hardly ruin it if you just do a halfway decent job with the rest of it. But if your center of interest doesn't work, no matter how well I paint this tree over there, it's not going to fix the center of interest. So you got to get it first. So I go to my center of interest and work out, because you want the rest of the painting to be keyed off of that center of interest. Too many people work all the way around. They're scared to death of the center of interest. Oh, I'm going to ruin it. I'm going to ruin it if I mess with that. Well, the problem is then you start forcing the center of interest to conform to all of the periphery. Get the center of interest first in the first 30 minutes of the painting, and then the next 2 or 3 hours are fun. But if you wait to do the center of interest at the very end, it's going to not likely work as well. Plus, it's going to force the painting to conform to the unimportant aspects of the painting compared to the center of interest. So let me just finish off a little bit of this, because I don't want to, not going to be able to carry this all the way through anyway.